it is not a good time to be upgrading a PC, but the thing is, with the purchase of my VR headset, I feel like it's kind of time to move on. Now, I've talked about it before, and I'm coming from an AMD FX series chip, so a lot of you who watch this might say, oh, you poor thing. Now, don't get me wrong, I understand that it was not the best CPU released even when it was brand new in 2012. However, it was the more affordable option, and it seemed like a good idea, and truthfully, I have not really had any bad experiences with it. It's mostly run what I needed to do, but I definitely didn't do any high-end gaming with it, but it's run most of the games that I've needed. It ran Doom 2016 pretty well, though I think I did notice some hiccups while recording, but maybe that's the worst I've seen so far. But it's the VR that has definitely shown the limitations of the chip, and it is time to finally do an upgrade, which means everything has to go. Motherboard and RAM along with it. I'm using DDR3 RAM, for Christ's sakes. DDR4 RAM has been common for the past few years. Of course, the AMD Ryzens were a few months out. I built this PC back in July 2016. The Ryzens first came to market around February to March of 2017, so was I going to wait? I had a dead PC already, but I was using my laptop to record gameplay stuff anyway, and that was showing its age, and it wasn't really optimal to begin with, so it was best to move on from that. I am in a better situation right now though, because I am not doing a forced upgrade. I can use this PC for as long as I need until I can source all the parts I need. But that's the trouble I'm kind of coming into right now. Currently, I'm running a GTX 1070 from EVGA and no issues with it. But again, the VR is probably stressing it more than it needs to be. But it still can't actually run VR. It might be my CPU that's bottlenecking me, if anything. Now, before we go into the main issue, I will still upgrade my graphics card. I'm going to get myself an EVGA 3080, which I can't really find. I've put in a reservation on the EVGA site for it. Funny enough, I did once run into, I believe, a bunch of 3090s in a local computer store here that I could have probably bought. But here's the thing, if you look at these prices for a 3090 in Canada, those of you complaining about an $800 3080 might want to count your blessings, because would you ever pay over $2,000 when it's the MSRP for a graphics card? This is why I did not go for a 3090 even though I could have swept it up. It is very, very expensive. The 3080s alone are over $1,200 over here, depending on the model. So I can at least afford a 3080, and I'm going with EVGA because I trust the brand. It seems like the RTX 30 series has some issues, and it's not limited to specific brands. Hopefully by the time I get mine, those issues will have been ironed out. Let's face it, early tech always has issues. Now, on to the main discussion. I've been using AMD since about 2007 when I got myself an Athlon 64X2. Yeah, that's what it's called. I still have the PC, it's just the motherboard's dead, so I can't run it. But I would have needed to upgrade it anyways at this point. It was old when I upgraded in 2016. So by default, do I continue going with AMD? I could buy one of the 3000 series CPUs right now because they're pretty much available. Or do I hold out and hope for a 5000 series CPU? Now, I will admit, I did go to a store and pre-order, if you want to call it that, a 5800X AMD Ryzen CPU. When will it arrive? I have no idea, but I figured since I'm coming from an older generation, I might as well make the leap to the next generation of the AMD Ryzen CPUs as opposed to going with the 3000 series. I had considered going for a 3900X originally, but it seems like it's not as suited for gaming, and since I would use it for a lot of gaming needs, I kind of decided I was originally going to go then for maybe a 3700X, but then I thought, well, I ended up buying a B550 motherboard, an MSI Tomahawk one, due to other plans that have progressed since the time I originally bought it. So I was thinking, well, I have the motherboard and it's compatible with the new Ryzen's anyway, so why not just get it now instead of getting a 3000 and then upgrading sometime in the next 3 years? Just spend that money now on a new one. And the 8-core 16-thread 5800X seemed like the best compromise between getting possibly a 5600X and, well, the much more expensive 5900X, which, again, you have to imagine Canadian dollars makes things much more expensive. About $639 for 5800X versus nearly $780 for the 5900X, not including taxes. So I'd possibly be looking at almost $900 for the CPU, while it was $700 and something for the 5800X after taxes. Now, I did see some threads on Reddit, which I don't go to often, but it can be a good resource for some things. And I saw some, I guess, clickbaity videos about the heat generated by 5800X. Now, depending on who you ask, either if you get a bad batch of CPUs, PC parts are always a gamble no matter what. It's the launch of a new series of CPUs which seem to have BIOS issues which cause stability issues, and it's kind of like, do you want to be within that first generation, or do you want to wait till all the BIOSes are figured out for stability, which will probably happen by the time I get my CPU, though I do question where the BIOS is on my current motherboard since I don't really have a way to test it out right now. So that purchase might not have been the best one, but whatever, I'm going to roll with it. Now, a lot of people are kind of pooing on Intel for their, I guess you could say, complacency and not really upgrading their line of Intel i-Core processors. The build quality seems to be mostly from the same types as they've been doing for, what, maybe a decade? You could go into bigger specs about the chip size or whatever, but this is not for the extreme enthusiast who cares about that. And I don't know if benchmarks really can help you decide what type of CPU you should get, because benchmarks stress the CPU way beyond what a normal user will use it for. So those people complain about the value shot out with performance or heat generated using Cinebench or Prime 95. I would use those as maybe a cautionary if you really intend to use it to the max, but when you're gaming and even with VR, I don't think anyone's going to use it to the max possible. And a decent air cooler, I don't think I need to water cool. A decent air cooler will bring you decent temperatures, I would say, and I just have more faith in air coolers in the event of a breakdown, because most likely you'll lose maybe one fan and you can still survive on a single fan. I use a dual fan push method, sort of a push-pull method. But an i9 10900K could be tempting. A 10-core 20-thread processor that is pretty much available. I can go out and buy it right now. I could question, though, how much does it cost for a motherboard to go with such a processor? I think I'm looking at the high 150 to 250 price range for a decent one, if my memory serves correctly, but I can check that out quickly while I'm editing this thing. But I can go out and buy one right now, and I could probably cancel my pre-order and go get an Intel. And, I mean, some people swear by Intel and say that it is very stable, but I was watching a video which claimed that when the i9-10900K came out, there were BIOS stability issues as well. So it's just something that happens when a new processor is released, I guess. But I would love to hear from anyone right now who's watching this. Probably not many, but if you're an AMD fanboy or an Intel fanboy, I would love to hear your input. I guess I've been very pro AMD from a lot of my PC life when I started building my own, but maybe I should just try Intel for once. I mean, competition is healthy, isn't it? But you can't have competition if you stick with the same brand all the time, and I don't think I could see an issue using an i9-10900K, and it's not, I have to update my motherboard anyways, so it doesn't hurt me. If you're coming from the 9th generation of the i-Core processors, then yeah, it might hurt because you now have to upgrade your motherboard, but I have to do that regardless, so gotta spend more. I do already have Corsair Vengeance 2 16GB sticks. It's supposed to be running at a frequency of 3200 megahertz, but I've heard things about Intel kind of throttling the memory speed unless you overclock it, but then it avoids warranties, but that's something else. I've done a lot of research into different things. Now, do I need a 3200 megahertz RAM speed? I don't know if I'd be able to tell the difference. I mean, I think my PC runs fast enough as it is, but maybe because I don't really know what a high-end machine performs like. But coming from mostly slower PCs, this is one of the first ones I've had that's run the most stable. Windows 10 has been one of the most stable OSs I've run in a long time when I turned off the stupid sleep thing that it used to do, not turning up my computer all the way when I was trying to shut it down. That caused me a lot of issues. I hate computers going to sleep mode anyway, unless they're a laptop. But anyway, I think this video is long enough as it is. I just like some input from people. Convince me. I want to be convinced from either side. I think it's great to have a healthy conversation. I think too many people are sort of stuck in their own little boxes of who's better, who's not. And a lot of people are rooting for AMD right now because they seem to be doing new things. And that's good because now they have to push Intel. But we are living in a duopoly. It's like the whole Boeing Airbus thing. Competition's good, but you got a duopoly in airplane manufacturing, except for some small players, but they don't matter. Who else makes CPUs? Not many for the PC market, almost no one. You have Intel and AMD. So, there's not really healthy competition when there's only two players. That's still, the prices are still high as it is, possibly. Granted, you are getting more performance for the prices you're paying right now, because you used to pay decent amounts for slower processors when they were brand new. So, I won't complain about paying $600 for a CPU that has 8 or 10 cores and runs at 16 or whatever it is, 12 to 24 or 20 threads. I know I just stumbled over myself. I'm not redoing that take. I've been talking long enough as it is, and it's after midnight here. I just felt like recording this thing, and I'd just love to hear from anyone who wants to tell me what their thoughts are. If you're running any of the new processors, you're running the 10th gen i9, you're running a 5000 series AMD CPU, I want to know what your experiences are, or if you have an opinion one way or another, because I'm open to anything. I don't mind going and canceling my 5800X pre-order. I'll take some of that money back and exchange it for an i9. I could do that easily, and I can wait for my 3080. I don't think I'm going to find one in the store anywhere, and I don't feel like back ordering that in the store either. I'm trying to get it directly through EVGA, hoping that maybe it processes faster. Anyways, thanks to those who have listened to me. I look forward to input from anyone who watched this. And, well, now you don't have to subscribe.